Thanks so much for joining me. So we're going to scrapbook. I thought today that I would pull out some items that I've been collecting all week long. There was a little bit of painting, some die cutting, some letterpress images, and then just some random bits and pieces from the Studio Calico kits that I've received this month and probably last month as well. So let's get started and see what we can create. The inspiration for this week is really this photo with my son lying on top of a Lego American flag. So that red, white, and blue will serve as the color palette for the entire layout. So now I'm just playing with the placement of the various photos to see what I like and how I might want to arrange them. This week is pretty heavy with images of my baby boy. This is his birthday week, so I suppose that is to be expected. Now, I've also pulled out several cards from the Studio Calico kits, and I mix and match my months, so they are not from any particular month, but probably the last 3 months. So once I have my photos and my 3x4 and 4x6 cards selected, I move on to trying to incorporate some of my homemade embellishments, if you will. So try placing some of my printable labels, stamped red heart, and also looks like that's a printable arrow. And one of the things that I am trying to do this week, and I hope this will be a valuable tip for you, is to incorporate both the negative and the positive. And I mean that several different ways. One, in terms of journaling the story that I want to tell this week, but also in terms of scrapbooking technique. So I'm going to use my electronic die cut machine, a very old Cricut, and I'm also going to be using punches and my Crocodile as well. And so here you see I've already been playing around, and so I have this card with the numbers that I created using my Cricut machine, and that other 4x6 card I have punched out the word today and some arrows. And so again, I have both the negative and the positive, and I want to incorporate both on this particular layout. First, I decide that I probably am going to try to see if I want to use that vellum sheet. In the end, I opt not to use it. That's one of the other things that I also try to challenge myself to do with this particular layout, and that is to incorporate vellum. So I suppose that's tip number 3 for the week. Tip number 1 is to journal both the negative and the positive. Tip number 2 is to incorporate both the negative and the positives from die cutting and punching. And tip number 3 has to do with incorporating vellum on the layout. Okay, so we are ready to go. So first what I'm doing is selecting some cards that I'm going to use really as pattern paper to place on the back of the negative card here. So the numbers that I punched, I kept the numbers, but now I have the sheet with all these numbers. And so I'm using the pattern paper cut into strips and layered over the back to, in a sense, create a very colorful quilt-like pattern on the back. And it will show through on the front. And I'm really only selecting red, blue. There's a little bit of that khaki, striped khaki color as well, but I consider that a neutral. So one of the little bits of paper had the word yes on it, and so I'm trying to place the word yes right in the center of the number 9. So it takes me a moment to get the placement just right. So once I have that card complete, I decide that there's some white space on the bottom, and I want to journal just a bit on the bottom. So I shove the card into my typewriter, quickly put the two sentences together, and we're good to go. And since I have the typewriter out, I might as well journal on the rest of my cards as well. Again, this is the week that my little guy turned 9. And so most of the journaling here has to do with our family celebrating his 9th birthday. Just like I did last week, if you watched my video, I used labels and I typed right out onto the labels. I find this terrifically easy and a great way to incorporate journaling on my layouts. So with most of the journaling done, I now turn to embellishing the rest of the layout. I use some of the punched, actually those are die cut arrows. And then the word today, which I'm fiddling with, is also die cut as well. I think I used my evolution machine to punch out the word today and the arrows as well. So just trimming that a bit and placing the photograph on top of the white 3x4 card. You'll notice that I do that with most of the photographs this week, leaving just a bit of white space around the edge of the 3x4 photograph. I top that card with the little blue flower, and it's done. Now I've moved on to the bottom left-hand corner, and on this 4x6 page, I actually place the 3x4 journaling card and then the photograph to the right. And I frequently will do this or use this technique on a 4x6 card. I try to place that little camera somewhere on the page, and in the end it just wouldn't fit anywhere, but you'll see me move it around a couple of times. My husband and I woke my little guy up on his birthday morning and surprised him with cake in bed, and so he was really shocked. And so that photograph shows him putting his hands over his face as we sang happy birthday to him at 6:15 in the morning. Okay, so now I've moved on to the right side of the page, and with this card, I'm incorporating a printable red arrow from Studio Calico, and in addition, this woe is from my Cricut machine. My Cricut had been in my closet for 5+ years. I had not used it. I never liked the fact that I could not weld together letters and create my own words and phrases. So there is some new firmware that's available that you can utilize. And so all I did was hook my laptop up to my Cricut, and now I'm able to weld together words and phrases and numbers, and it's really just amazing. And now I can see some value in actually holding on to my Cricut or using my Cricut rather than allowing it to collect dust. I'd considered selling it several times. Okay. So I took a little break and then I've returned. You see that my sleeves changed. And I like the card that I created with the quilt work behind, that's what I'm going to call it, behind the numbers, but it seemed to need a little bit of punch. So I pulled out a large 9 from the Tim Holtz collection, and using some black thickers, I think the 9 years adds a little bit of drama, if you will, to that particular 4x6 card. So now, since I had the Tim Holtz out, I'm pulling out some of the arrows, adhering them down, and also incorporating another Studio Calico printable as well. Now, the other thing in terms of using negative and positive space is that in addition to incorporating die cuts from electronic machines, you can always go back to good old-fashioned 20th century punches. So this particular punch is a border punch, which is nice, but it wouldn't allow me to put the punches on the other side of the card. So I pulled out my crocodile. And so by cutting a little slit right under the journaling tag, I'm able to use both sides of the crocodile, the small and the large hole, and create some random holes on the card. The overall effect, I think, is really cute and complements the border punch holes nicely. So once that's done, I like it, but it still needs a little something. It's missing some pizzazz. So I move away from it for a moment, put some wooden stars on one of my journaling cards, and then I come back to the 4x6 card. So I know I want to put that thumbs up in the middle of the card. But again, it needs some pizzazz. So I decide to go with some enamel dots. Some little black enamel dots, the little micro ones, which are like nearly impossible to pull off or apply. And then I also use some, I'm going to call them rhinestone dots, some rhinestone dots as well. And so it seems to me the combination of the crocodile holes and the micro dots and the enamel dots, there's a lot of interest there, eye candy perhaps. And I really like the end result. It looks cute. So now I'm moving on to placing some acrylic stars that were in a recent Studio Calico kit onto the gray card. And that go I actually die cut using my Cricut as well. So now the card says go to the moon and back, and the acrylic stars are a perfect complement. My letterpress, I ordered my letterpress, the new We Are Memory Keepers. And so yesterday it arrived, and so I was playing with it. And so some of those words noteworthy that I just placed on the bottom of that left-hand red journal card were some of my first takes, tries using the letterpress. Waste not, want not. Less than perfect, but it works. So I've decided to use the Tim Holtz little black plastic here and now phrase on my title card. Using another label and a rub-on. And so that little clustering with the red and white, the here and now phrase, label and rub-on works. And the title card is done. Done, done, done. Staple, staple, and we are good to go. Another Tim Holtz arrow. And the other thing you might note is that on that photograph where I just placed that Tim Holtz arrow, there is an XOXOXO and it's in blue. That actually was another Cricut die cut. And all of the die cuts, whether I'm using the We Are Memory Keepers mechanical die cut machine or whether I'm using the Cricut, I do all of it in white cardstock. And the beauty in that is that I'm able to make any of the words, phrases, or numbers fit the color palette, the color of any particular layout. So I used a little bit of my acrylic paint, watered down to almost a watercolor consistency, and turned the white XOXO into blue. So I like that. I like having the flexibility, and I really like the kind of watercolor effect that I was able to achieve. So now I'm applying my labels that I've already journaled over. I think something fell to the floor, or I misplaced my labels. So I was searching for them. All right, found them. We're good. All right, so the first label was blue. The second was kind of a taupe, and then I realized the third one was blue as well. I didn't want to have a label matching the first blue label. So I cut the end of the sentence out, find some other labels, and apply, cut the sentence up and apply it to the other labels. Now, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the labels that I'm using, they are actually vellum and not cardstock. One of the things I did this week was that when I printed out some of my labels, I printed them out on some really inexpensive vellum that I picked up at Staples. It adds a slightly different touch because of the transparency, which is quite nice. But the text, whether computer or typewriter, is still easily visible. So this 4x6 card is really about done. I just want to add a couple more touches. A few of the labels are coming up, so I need some more adhesive. And then I decide to place some of these stars on the card as well. I believe the stars came from last month's Studio Calico kit. Don't hold me to that though. But I think that's the case. Okay, can't get enough of my little mini stapler. I use it for absolutely everything. It is one of my go-to tools. Okay. So as you can see, we're almost there. I mean, this layout came together really quite easily. I also used vellum on the photo. I don't know if you could see that. My camera died, and so I didn't realize that it was not videotaping while I was still working. But I typed out my journaling on the vellum and then applied the vellum to the photo. And now my finished cards. I'm really pleased with how everything turned out. I love the red, white, and blue. And the touches of black, I think, add a nice pop. One more little final touch. And we're done. That's it. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you learned something. And please remember, use the negative and the positive. And along the way, hug somebody.